And I hope you don't mind that I start quoting a dialogue from the Wachowski's Matrix Reloaded, because he's a bit too mainstream as well. But I'm going to have a read at the conversation between Councillor Hammond and Neo. Councillor Hammond, I like it down here. I like to be reminded the city survives because of these machines. These machines are keeping us alive while other machines are coming to kill us. Interesting, isn't it? Power to give life and the power to end it. We have the same power. I suppose we do. But down here, sometimes I think about all those people still plugged into the matrix. And when I look at these machines, I can't help thinking that in a way, we are plugged into them. But we control these machines. They don't control us. Of course not. How could they? The idea is pure nonsense, but it does make one wonder just what is, if we wanted, we could shut these machines down. Of course, that's it. You hit it. That's control, isn't it? If we wanted, we could smash them to bits. Although if we did, we'd have to consider what would happen to our lights, our heat, our air. So we need machines and they need us. Is that your point, Councillor? No, no point. Old men like me don't bother with making points. There's no point. Is that why there are no young men on the council? Good point. So hello, my name is Erwin Huerta. I am a journalist and academic at Cambridge University and the convener of the data schools. Welcome to this public event, Responsible AI for Journalism, which is part of the ongoing social data school. It's taking place as we speak, which is organized by Cambridge Digital Humanities at the University of Cambridge. Let me just give a bit of an introduction to the subject, and also I'm going to introduce our participants today. The use of artificial intelligence in journalism has been ongoing for several years, you probably know. But the advent of generative AI tools like ChatGPT, Bart, Midjourney, and others has ignited a thorny public debate. We now have access to technologies that appear to surpass human capabilities in structuring information and producing publishable content, which deepen the changes in the already battered journalistic practice, sometimes tapping into them with gusto, and others being existentially threatened by them. Mainstream conversations are concerned about the survival of journalism as an industry, every now and then touching upon the most pressing ethical challenges. So for instance, how digital technologies are widening global asymmetries, their effectiveness in combating or exacerbating disinformation. But it is less common to hear about how journalists report on these technologies, particularly at a time when they are increasingly dependent on these machines for their work, and therefore on the big tech companies profiting from them. In this public event, we will discuss these problems and ask, can journalists use AI responsibly? If so, how? Also, how much of this can be tackled with better design technology? How much with ethical reporting? And how much with regulation? We are first going to hear from Rona Meyer, an investigative journalist who has not only used digital tools on the ground, but is now also critically reflecting on them, questioning how a generalizing approach that intends to talk about ethics can be applied equally. It is assumed in every part of the world. So she is then preoccupied with how to use these technologies in different contexts. On the other side of the coin, as it were, a debate about responsible AI like this one, like the one we're having right now, we have to touch upon how journalists report on these technologies sustaining their practice. And for that, we're going to hear from Tom Holinek, a researcher at Cambridge interested in technology design and who helped produce the AI and Responsible Journalism Toolkit, which deals with how to responsibly report on AI risks and capabilities. You'll see then that, unlike Councillor Hammond, both of our speakers are not old men, so they do want to make a point about responsible AI for journalism. So each of the participants are going to speak for 20 minutes or so, and then we have time for a Q&A. More on that in a minute. But first, let me introduce Rona Meyer. Rona Meyer is, as I said, a Nigerian investigative journalist and media trainer, and now a PhD scholar at the Montfort University, UK. Apart from having a background of working on impactful stories about the African continent, working for major media outlets and journalism networks. Rona is also visiting senior research associate now at King's College and advisory board member at NextGen News Study, an ongoing research by Financial Times Strategies, Google News Initiative, and Medill Northwestern University into young people's news consumption habits. So I am going to hand over now to Ruana, who's going to speak to us for 20 minutes or so.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Hello, Ivan. I'm just gonna share my screen and do the thing where we have for accessibility's sake, have a large screen. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So hello, everyone. Thank you for the thumbs up. That lets me know. Good morning, good afternoon, evening, good night, wherever you are. I'm happy to be here, mainly as an audience member. So thank you for having me here to share my insights, because as we all know, AI is relatively new for everybody. In speaking about responsible AI for journalism, I'll quickly touch on the landscape, particularly from Africa. I'll give some examples of some I find interesting of collective and individual AI use, including the main ways I use AI as a freelancer. Then I'll highlight the general challenges that I've noticed about AI use. I will be using my, I'll be relying on my background as not just as a researcher, but somebody who managed a grant across 60 newsrooms in 4 countries in Africa up until September. So if you hear me speaking, it's from this perspective. Then I will speak on the main hurdles to us using AI in responsible journalism. Of course, we're not here to point fingers. It's about making recommendations and suggestions. So if you're looking for any naming and shaming, wrong webinar, you can escape now. But it's really about suggestions on how we can begin surmounting the challenges. And also, because we have one of the people that are here to already do the work in surmounting this challenge. So an overview, AI use is moving rather quickly in Africa, but it's doing so for business. Businesses, not journalism. You know, businesses are being automated. Africa now has over 2,400 companies whose expertise is in AI. Most of those were opened in the last 5 years. I say this as a background that there is cognizance, there's awareness about the need for AI, even in Africa's healthcare, it's getting there, but not so much in African journalism. So journalism is the laggard here. Newsroom uptake of AI is very slow. That's the summation of a scoping study. As you can see here, all links will be made available. And so the verdict is that we are quite behind. What sort of journalistic AI activity we see seen mainly in Kenya, in South Africa, and to some extent in Egypt. Now, we all know why. The contextual background is that these are already well-developed and often more funded countries in terms of journalism and journalistic activity. So the few instances where AI is used continuously is seen mainly in the African branches of global media brands or in our homegrown legacy multimedia groups, and a few digital native outlets. So most of the time, these organizations use paid for premium AI applications like CrowdTangle, Data Miner, Chartbeat, or they even develop their own AI tools. The type of AI Africa is using in journalism is mostly functional AI. That's the type that assists you in carrying out tasks or predicting tasks. So they use it for audience engagement predictions, headline optimization, search optimization, and processing the news content, basically to bring in clicks. So it's important that we are clear that this is often geared towards economic and sustainability purposes. This ties in with this event, which is why I mention it. So while the richer organizations use premium AI software, there's a more popular trend actually in Africa towards open source AI-powered fact-checking tools. So often you will see individual reporters and smaller newsrooms for a long time, actually, for years, using free open source versions for verifying images and videos like TinEye, Reverse Search, InVid, Many newsrooms also for some time have been using AI to infuse accessibility. So many websites can now be read as audio. You just click on it. They put in all these plugins and all of that. So that's the landscape for you there. Now, based on rising collaboration and AI training, here are some interesting examples and uses of AI. AI is used for cutting costs. So in Zimbabwe, we have the digital outlet cited, and they have an AI presenter. There she is. You can follow her on Twitter. South African newsroom Outlier, they use AI for royalty-free images. And there's their editor, Alistair, saying it's a big deal for them as a newsroom because they struggle to find royalty-free images. And it's also about diversity because it feels like stock images. So AI is for cost cutting. Then what these trends do with cost cutting, they help the users to produce studio-like news bulletins without having big production budgets. There's also a safety element to it because it also means nobody's going to go and burn down your radio station if they don't like what the presenter is saying because the presenter doesn't exist. AI is also used for fact-checking audio broadcasts by Dubawa. They're a fact-checking newsroom with a presence across West Africa. So they focus on the languages there. And it's important, what they are doing is also contextual because audio is the main medium through which practically most of Africa consumes news. And then at the informational level, serving the wider landscape, we have a new news letter called Develop AI, and it's a podcast. It's also, the newsletter is in a podcast that is made entirely by AI. So these are the uses, the interesting uses that are popping up. And again, you can get all the details from this. Me personally, I use AI to increase my earnings because journalists have to eat, right? So first, I use a paid version of Murf, M-U-R-F, to convert all my voiceovers because I report on West Africa, I travel, I have reporting trips. So when I come back, I'm reporting in the real language, Yoruba, Pidgin, Liberian Creole. And so I convert all this audio or even text into voice, into German. I convert it into German, I convert it into European languages. And that means I can sell and do sell to German outlets what originally came in a language that would not fit the typical European audience. I use Google Pinpoint, which is free, to save time when I'm transcribing. I use it for scraping data from PDF documents and also to search for trends because Google Pinpoint has a cache of documents that the partners put up there. Again, this might be tied to their machine learning. I don't really know, but you can go on there and see a lot of, when you go on Google Pinpoint, you can see a lot of documents and you can access them. And I do access them to just check if there's anything interesting or if my country is mentioned, if Nigeria is mentioned, if Germany is mentioned in this thing going around, this document going around. So that's what I use it for. And finally, I'm a trainer. And last week, I used Microsoft Bing to diversify online training I was having for journalists in conflict zones because most of them they only spoke direct and were able to communicate. So this is what AI is doing at a newsroom and institutional level. So what are the challenges of responsible AI? Many of them are ethical because majority of us use open source tools. Not everybody can afford them, and it's not just an African thing, it's a global South thing. So most people don't know what type of information to anonymize when they are feeding the AI tool, and that's a big problem. And then there's also the ethics of, okay, when you use AI, what are you doing to the creatives? And this is something that happened to a Nigeria-based magazine. So about 3 weeks ago, they announced that even though it was cheaper to use AI to generate art, they were not going to do it anymore. They are going to discontinue it because they felt it's better to put money in the pockets of actual artists. And then they also felt the need to put at the end, which is quite interesting. No, we have never accepted AI generated stories. So there's that challenge of trying to retain audience trust, trying to satisfy the ethical needs of your workers while being lured by AI and the ease of AI. Away from how we use the tools, of course, there's the problem of a lack of relevant languages for the global south. So we know this, the machine models, that are coming up, they are mainly focused on business automation from the African side. Yeah, and even healthcare. So journalism is not yet at pace. And so it means we'll continue to have this bias, this lopsidedness, these hallucinations that come with AI, unless we actively change something. And speaking of hallucinations and things, there's a big gap in knowing how to use AI, how to report on AI, and how to navigate the ethical and intellectual property aspects of AI among journalists. And the second layer on top of that is the gap is wider when it comes to women journalists and when it comes to older journalists of any gender or non-binary. So we have those gaps. If people know about AI in Africa, it's not often the women journalists and it's not often the older journalists. The last challenge is that Africa has infrastructural gaps. We have less of the cloud computing infrastructure that is needed to solidify equity in this AI race. So most of the time, the machine learning models, they are not based in Africa and understandably will therefore prioritize the main intellectual and geographical hosts that have proprietary. So that's a big problem, actually, and a challenge. To problematize the issue, what I see is that the problems exist already with the basis of AI's design for journalism, as well as the trajectory where it's going to. So as I've noted already, AI is coming from a language bias, is coming from a cultural bias from the global South context. It's also coming even from a gender bias as well. And the trajectory does not appear to be changing from where I sit, because we still have that foundation being, okay, this is how AI is used in the West. This is how AI is used in Kenya. What are you going to use it to do that is a version of this in Nigeria? It really should not be that way. And I think that's going to be an increasing problem, because you will have a lot of AI that actually is not fit for purpose or is not ethical. The second problem I see to doing responsible journalism with AI is that legislation is now really being led by tax and by surveillance. So what is pushing a lot of governments, we've seen this now happen, I think 2 weeks ago in Kenya, and tech companies are trying to fight back, that we don't even know what we are going to use the AI for. But the first thing you're talking about is how to tax it. So for me, I feel when legislation is led with the means of tax them, or curb them, we're not going to get the best out of AI. And I tend to see that happening slowly on the continent. The third thing that I see as a problem, which I feel is the biggest actually, because it directly concerns journalism, is the projectification of AI and the thematization of AI and AI training and AI support. So this is a problem that we have seen everywhere. AI is starting to fall into the same pattern of journalistic cross-pollination that occurs whenever the West meets the South. So you see a projectification of the effort. If it's AI now, it's going to be time-centered grants. Or here's a grant, do this for AI, or it is thematized. The AI should focus, or let's say, even if it wasn't AI, let's give an example. Your reporting should focus on climate change. Your reporting should focus on disinformation. When you do this, you actually turn what should be a system, what should be infused forever for the long term into a profession, you turn it into piecemeal work. And I think this is the biggest problem we are going to have. Most people say AI is not seen as a priority in newsrooms in low resource countries. And I will say AI will never be a priority unless the AI becomes relevant to journalists and the newsrooms in a low resource country. So for me, the main problem, the main hurdle is the projectification and thematization of AI support, because of all of this is the fastest that is already happening. Tax legislation can take a long time to come on stream, but we already see this happening. So what do I recommend in closing? I think we must deprojectify the AI response, okay? We don't want it to fall into that same pattern. We have to design grants, we have to design AI, we have to design machine learning models and processes that address the systemic problems journalism is facing. It is not enough to say, let us do AI that fights disinformation when the journalist is under surveillance. How about AI that helps them against surveillance? It's not enough to say, let's put you in a place and then all of you actually sit down and think of global South African problems and we code and we do the AI and all of that. If the grant systems that choose journalists for these responses cannot be made more equitable using AI. So for example, this is part of what I've been trying to do, and I'm starting to do with my research. I've worked in grant work, and then I've also seen a way to automize responses from grant makers, from grant appliers that uses AI. I think when you use AI for contextual things like sustainability, increasing trust, to combat asymmetries in journalism grants, when you focus on the root cause instead of projectizing, then you will stop the extractiveness that sometimes comes with learning and comes with journalism work. I feel we should also design to protect. We should design to protect. AI design and AI outreach and support should be designed to protect editorial integrity. So far, we've had a lot of hand-wringing, or how we're going to manage provenance, how we're going to make sure that everybody knows this is AI. Some people have a separate type of, one newsroom has a separate way of approaching AI, another one has a separate. I think we need to come together. And one of the most promising steps I've seen, good timing for this event, is from the recently proposed EU AI law, AI Act. It's not yet law, but I think journalism can actually learn from that, take some things from that. Of course, there's a steep taxation thing going on there, as we know, but I think we can start to look at how we can design across the board, regionally, countrywide, to protect. I think AI design should try to protect. And then finally, most importantly, I think AI design should design for context, cognizant equity. You have to recognize the context. So let's look at this. Nobody is telling us journalists. Everybody is throwing things. I mean, we're like the bride. The Global South is like the bride. It's time for us to support you with AI, Global South journalists. That's great. But nobody is talking about the fact that money and intellectual property is important in AI. If we look at this, the BBC, very open to AI, but they blocked data scraping, okay? They know why they did it. Meanwhile, on the other hand, the AP is working to license their news stories to OpenAI that the BBC blocked. In this story, the amount which AI will get was not disclosed. What's happening with the machine learning models that are done in trainings that are used all over from Africans that are not getting paid or do not know how to block it? So this is where I think we should center AI software and AI projects around enlightening journalists, enlightening newsrooms on how to get due compensation for the inclusion of their material in machine learning. Compensation does not always mean money, but at least we have to try to start making sure that this journey starts on an equitable footing. I think we also need to, more importantly, context cognizant equity is when you assist journalists to understand how to report on AI itself and how to use the AI, And so this is why I'm very excited to hear what Thomas has to say, because as soon as I heard about your work, I said, yeah, this is the type of thing we should be looking at, not just, oh, here's a grant, tell us about a story on AI, or build something. We don't even know where to start building from. So thank you very much, Thomas, and I'm looking forward to that. Thank you all as well. I will end this presentation now. I hope I didn't go off time. I'm Nigerian, I talk too much.
It was a brilliant presentation, Rona. Thank you, particularly like you mentioned on the structural challenges. Now, let me introduce you to Dr. Tomasz Kolinek, who is a designer and technology ethics researcher with a background in cultural studies, philosophy, user experience design, and communications. Currently, he is a postdoctoral research fellow at the Leverhulme Centre for the Future of Intelligence, CFI, at the University of Cambridge, and a research associate at Jesus College, Cambridge. Previously, Tomasz was a Vice Chancellor's PhD scholar at Cambridge and a visiting research fellow at the École Normale Supérieure in Paris. He has contributed to numerous research projects, including the Global AI Narratives Project at LCFI and the Ethics of Digitization Research Program at the Bergkamp Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard, and of course, the toolkit that he's going to be talking to us about now. So handing over to you, Tomasz.
Thanks so much, Irving, and thanks so much, Rona, for the presentation. It was so comprehensive, so rich, and also thanks for reminding us that journalists have been working with these tools for a while, for transcribing, for translating, and it's interesting how the question of how to use AI responsibly in the media sector has reemerged with this force thanks to generative AI, or because of generative AI. I'm not sure if we can say thanks to. But we will come back to this later. Let me just quickly share my screen. Okay. Okay. So thanks, Irving, for introducing me. I can skip this part. Maybe one thing I will mention about my background that does contextualize this work a little bit is that my first professional steps were actually in journalism. I remember reporting on Snowden, so that was probably 10 years ago or so. And then I also worked for a little while in technology marketing before switching more to user experience design and user experience research. So this is to say that I have at some point in my life also contributed to creating narratives of artificial intelligence in these different ways. Including in contributing to the AI hype that I will be saying a bit more about in a second. So I tried to come up with some clever distinction between different ways of looking at responsibility, AI, and journalism. I'm not sure if I came up with anything satisfactory. But this is really to say that Rona was focusing on the one hand, actually on two things. On the one hand, on the responsible use of AI by journalists. On the other hand, on responsible AI development for journalism. And I will be saying a bit more about responsible reporting on artificial intelligence or responsible construction of narratives around artificial intelligence. So a bit about how my work relates to this question. Why am I even thinking about this? I'm not a journalism scholar or a media scholar per se. And there are two reasons. The first one is that, actually, as Irving mentioned, I worked at the center that I'm a postdoc, where I'm working now as a postdoc. I used to work as a PhD student with Kanta Dihal and Stephen Cave on the AI narratives project. So the research center that I work for is highly interdisciplinary. We have engineers, computer scientists, philosophers, cultural studies scholars involved, but also people who specifically focus on narratives and representations of artificial intelligence and the politics of representations of artificial intelligence and other technologies. So this book that you can see here, published earlier this year by Oxford, Imagining AI, How the World Sees Intelligent Machines, stems from the Global AI Narratives Project, where we looked at how different cultural traditions, different philosophies around the world influence the way people perceive the risks and benefits of AI differently. So I contributed here to two chapters. One that might be in particular interesting to some of you here is the one on different meanings of AI around the world, where we looked at from very different cultural linguistic perspectives at how the original term AI, coined in the 1950s by McCarthy, has been translated and adopted by different cultures to signify slightly different things with slightly different connotations. So that's one area, and one reason why I'm interested in how AI is represented by journalists and journalistic narratives of AI. On the other hand, I'm also interested, and this is where my primary area of research really lies, the question of toolkits, blueprints or guidelines as a medium for, or as a tool for translating some of the theoretical ideas, values, principles, theory of AI ethics into design practice. So I did this massive scoping review of available toolkits to identify what we already have, what is still missing, what kind of methods, methodologies, and approaches are adopted by different teams that try to help designers adopt or translate the theory of AI ethics into design practice. And the toolkit that Irving has already mentioned, this one, AI and Responsible Journalism Toolkit, draws on these two areas of my research. So even though this toolkit is obviously not intended for designers, it builds on this work, the theoretical work on what it means to design a toolkit that can help someone translate a theory into practice. And specifically here focusing on the question of narratives and empowering journalists, but also communicators more broadly, to responsibly report on AI risks and capabilities. And I should mention that this toolkit was developed in collaboration with my research assistant, Abdullah Safir, who I don't think is here, but he's amazing. So you can check out his work as well if you're interested in some of the things we've done together. So maybe a little bit more about why we thought this kind of toolkit was necessary in this research. So this toolkit in many ways is a response to some of the things that my colleagues and many others have been working on in relation to the politics of representations of artificial intelligence, pointing to some problems and why we need to think about these representations. So media representations of AI can, for instance, perpetuate negative gender and racial stereotypes about the creators, users, and beneficiaries of AI. This is to say that, for example, even though men do constitute the majority of AI workforce, so to speak, so they do constitute the majority of developers, the representations of AI researchers in popular media, including films, actually the statistics is actually worse in fiction than it is in reality. So even fewer women AI research scientists are present in these depictions. which then, and I mean, this is one of the reasons why we cared about this, which then obviously in one way or another influences how future generations of researchers see themselves in the field. So this might influence, and it does, we know that it does influence how younger generations of researchers make their career choices. Otherwise, these media representations that are produced irresponsibly, or at least without proper care, might, for instance, give the impression that AI is equivalent to robotics, or in general, make AI seem like something that is still yet to come, or something that is, so ideas of general artificial intelligence, for instance, rather than focus on applications that are already in use, such as the ones that Rona pointed us to, including Google Translate. And so this is obviously related to this third point that you can see here on the screen, misdirecting attention from the harms implicit in the real life applications of the technologies that are already changing our lives. So the idea is that by focusing on some potential implications of artificial intelligence that are yet to come, focusing on and indeed using images of, for example, the Terminator to illustrate these narratives, journalists and communicators a little more broadly can misdirect our societal attention from what is already happening right now and what we should be acting on now. So I think another thing important to mention in relation to the toolkit is that we decided to apply all the theory of participatory and critical design in the production of this toolkit. So we decided to co-design it with practitioners, and Irving was one of them, actually. So thank you so much for contributing to the toolkit earlier this year. So my colleagues and I, Eleanor Drade and Dorian Peters, we convened a workshop with practitioners. So around 30 people came from very different backgrounds, most of them practicing journalists, but not only, some representatives of NGOs such as We and AI, the people who created the Better Images of AI, a project. If you don't know Better Images of AI, please do check it out. So we convened this workshop, and we looked at some of the available resources and guidelines that are already there to help, in theory at least, to help journalists report on AI more responsibly. But we wanted to find out whether these tools that are already available are actually helpful, and if not, for what reasons, and what we can do differently, or what more can be done to help journalists, to empower journalists to do better, to report on AI more responsibly. So there are a few conclusions, and one of them was that there was the need for a user-friendly hub gathering all these already existing tools was pronounced by the people who participated in the workshop. A hub gathering tools that would help communicators gain a deeper understanding of AI's technical, but also, and probably most importantly in a way, socio-technical dimensions. Also connecting them with a diverse array of AI and AI ethics experts. And the question of diversity is the key element in relation to this point. And also provide them with information about support networks and funding opportunities, which I will say a bit more about in a second. Based on some of these findings, we decided to create the toolkit, and here are some of our goals, or I'm not sure why I named them, why I used the term solution here. I mean, they're really goals. So we want to empower technology journalists and investigative journalists to challenge industry-driven narratives of AI. As I mentioned, we want to. So this goal here relates specifically to technology journalists and investigative journalists. So people who already know a lot about AI and might need extra resources to be able to continue the critical work that they're already doing. On the other hand, though, we also want to support journalists and news reporters who know nothing about AI, who need an introduction to some of the key concepts in AI and AI ethics, and perhaps an introduction to how professional ethics that is already in place can be adapted for AI-focused reporting. We also, I mean, this is our hope, really. We want to also raise awareness among media executives and editors, because even if you have an amazing journalist who really knows everything about the potential harms in using certain kinds of metaphors to refer to AI or certain kinds of representations of AI, if the editor is not on board, and if they push for a particular vision of AI to sell or to increase the number of clicks, I mean, none of the efforts that we are talking about today will actually matter. I think it's important to say that even though we decided to stick with the term journalism so the toolkit is it is in theory meant primarily for journalists, but we do want it to be used or adoptable by others in the communications field. So we're thinking about copywriters, marketing professionals, PR managers, and we also want to encourage technologists within the industry, which again might be a little utopian, but one thing that we discovered during the workshop, and this relates also, I think, to the next point. So both researchers in academia, but also researchers in the industry, is that sometimes they perpetuate certain ideas of AI, not because they want to perpetuate a harmful vision, or they want to not all of them want to hype up, what they're doing, and in effect miscommunicate the capabilities of the technologies that they're producing. But sometimes they refer back to some metaphors that they know well and that they think will resonate with their audiences, with the broader public. And this is why sometimes we hear these references to the Terminator or HAL, etc. So these popular images of AI, and this obviously comes back to some of the previous points that I made about the importance of narratives of artificial intelligence more broadly, including fictional narratives. So to wrap up, I'm not sure how much time we have. Yeah, we have a little bit more time. So I will just very quickly introduce you to the toolkit. So we decided to split all the resources that we collected into 4 categories: education, ethics, voices, and structures, that to us are equally important. So this is why the toolkit is designed this way. So on the one hand, education, this section or this category introduces journalists and communicators to key themes in AI research, and in particular, it helps to debunk harmful myths, and introduces journalists in a user-friendly way to some key terms such as foundation model or artificial general intelligence, how these terms have been appropriated, how they might evoke some problematic ideas about the technology. And we also paid attention to the time commitment. So each tool in a so each tool is also assigned a particular number of minutes that it might take to get acquainted with, just to make sure that journalists are not overwhelmed with lots of different tools that they might not have time to explore. And then we have a section on ethics, or a collection of guidelines on the ethics of representing AI and communicating AI to the public. So the type of tools that you hear most about when you ask someone, what can we do? What we, by we, I mean here researchers or academics working on representations of AI, what can we do to help journalists report more responsibly? And so you get these lists of things that journalists should not do, lists of metaphors that they should not be referring to, lists of tropes, or themes such as anthropomorphization of artificial intelligence, presenting AI as human-like, that are highlighted as problematic for various reasons. And these lists are definitely necessary, so that's why we included them here, but they're not the only thing that we should care about when we think about responsible representations of AI. So that's why we have the section on education, on ethics, but also on voices. So ensuring that journalists can quite easily access a database of AI experts that include those who represent minoritized stakeholder groups. We list here a number of networks of specialists in the field that we believe they should be including more and more often in their reporting. So the Women in AI Network, Black in AI Network, and several others, including Indigenous AI, and the Many Worlds of AI Network. So there's this section on voices, and finally structures. So we recognize that it's not only about listing issues or even explaining to journalists what AI is and what it isn't, or helping them tackle some of these questions, but it is also about ensuring that they know where they can get help, help understood very broadly here, help in finding funding to do their critical work. So the AI Accountability Network at the Pulitzer Center is one of these sources of funding that journalists can apply to do independent investigative research into certain aspects of artificial intelligence to keep the AI companies in check. And we also provide some details of organizations that can help journalists that are targeted by technology companies in retaliation when they, essentially when a certain technology company is not particularly happy about a specific investigation that a journalist is working on. So we provide links to these types of resources as well. And finally, one thing that we learned during this workshop that I mentioned earlier, and an important one to mention, and Rona started her presentation with the idea of naming and shaming that we won't be doing here. And indeed, this was also reinforced by all the practitioners who joined us for the workshop. So while it is important to point out some of the problematic uses of metaphors and some problematic trends in the representations of AI in journalism, it is equally important to highlight and value positive examples of reporting on AI. The kind of reporting that that reveals hidden labor of humans behind the AI systems, that centers the human in the interactions with AI systems, and revealing potential harms. So you have some examples here: the AI Colonialism series by Karen Howe, who back then works at the MIT Technology Review, and a few others. And yeah, I think I will end here just to make sure that we have enough time for questions. So thank you very much, and I'll stop sharing.
Thank you very much also, Tom, for that amazing work that you did and now that you're showing to us. So just to remind you that we are in this public event that is part of the Social Data School at the University of Cambridge, which is an intensive course of a week or 2 weeks for practitioners, journalists, people in NGOs, people in research as well, trying to deal with social data for impactful investigations or research, projects in the public interest. And our students, who some of them are part of the audience right now, are getting this training and lectures up until next week. But we have other editions of data schools during the year. So you're very welcome to explore our website and see our upcoming data schools for the year 2024. So now I am going to move on to the Q&A. And I think we have already some very interesting questions over here. And I'm just going to choose the first one that I see here. And I'm not going to mention the the name right now for ease, right? And so any of you can respond to this, but I suppose probably with this one, Rona is the most appropriate person to respond to. If I got it right, says this question, Rona mentioned that AI is used as a cost-cutting way when it comes to visually illustrating stories. Isn't that ethically problematic? AI-generated illustrations are based on the creative work of other people that has somehow been acquired. Shouldn't those people earn something as their intellectual property has fed the AI we use?
So I really like that question because it points to what the very importance of this event. When you look at AI and responsible AI use, the journalists that use it, they are not using the software that is free. So even when you look at these types of software, there's no free AI anymore. What they have is free versions, but there's no free AI, right? And so what they do is use the free versions. So ethically, on that part, the journalists can be said to be free of any issues because all the free versions are always watermarked. So there's the provenance, there's everything there. Now, yes, it is ethically wrong because that wrongness comes from the people that created the AI, that trained the models, if we are to put it like that. Because what they've done is set up inequity. I'll give you an example. There's a lot of machine learning going on Twitter, and it's happening in Africa. Let me tell you how we know. They will say, if you're a Black lady from so-and-so tribe in Nigeria, paste your JPEGs. And you can just see people. So you see the tribal marks. If you have tribal marks on your face, paste your JPEGs. Whoever that cachet is going to is the one that has to have that responsibility. Because what journalists will now see on the outside actually is pay to use this. You can use this for free, but you can't use it totally free. So we have to be careful with AI where we put responsibility for. And I will always say it's not often just that journalists want to make a quick buck. As you can see, one newsroom said, we're not going to do this anymore. So it's a good question. And yeah, it goes back to who created the models.
Yeah. Thank you, Rona. I'm just choosing one that probably segues really good with that one, but I'm going to cover all of the questions. Do you know if any of the national or international journalism organizations is working on a standard code of ethics for the industry?
Thomas, do you want to answer, or should I?
I also would like to have a say if you don't mind, but yeah, go ahead if you want, Thomas.
Well, I mean, very quickly, we have a few initiatives that try to do just that. One of the most recent ones is the AP guidebook that includes certain suggestions for journalists on how to use artificial intelligence. There is also the I have it somewhere here on my desktop. I can look up the name and send. There are several of these initiatives, and it's great that they're emerging. But I would again stress what I said earlier in response to Rona's presentations. It's really interesting that these questions are emerging now because of ChatGPT and several other generative AI tools, while journalists have been using AI for a really long time. So it's great that it's happening, that people are starting to think about it, but they also might want to think about it more comprehensively, not only in relation to AI-generated content, understood very narrowly. So that's one. And two, there are some, as I mentioned, some guidelines on representations of AI, but these are still not really, I mean, they're not really comprehensive. And yeah, okay, I'll stop here. Rona, maybe do you have anything to?
I would like to add something. Sorry, Rona, yeah, you go ahead, Danny, and then I can also
add was I think in November, yes, we had the Paris Charter on AI.
Yes, that's precisely the one. Yeah, you go.
So there's that, and then I forget the actual, I will have to check, but I forget the actual university, but there's a university in Ghana working with the University of Munich, and they have a responsible AI network, Africa. So they are working together. And so there are things happening. But it's questions like this that we should really be talking to each other about while it's happening. Yeah.
Yeah, the Paris Charter, which was an initiative of a number of journalists and researchers as well, to come up with some sort of code of conduct, right? When it comes to the use of AI, was recently published in November 2023. So you can find it like that, Paris Charter on AI and journalism. And you know, Reporters Without Borders was very much involved in that. So I think it is a very interesting charter. Probably there are things that we can discuss as well. Particularly, I would say, you know, the structural problems and dependence of journalists with platforms. That is probably not a major thing or theme in the charter, but it is an interesting exercise, and these are very novel exercises, new exercises of coming up with codes of conduct, which we have to look at, right? Not the only one. Probably more of them are going to come. We've got other efforts as well from individual media, for instance, The Guardian having a almost like a declaration or disclaimer about the use of AI as well, right? Trying to respond to questions of how are you using AI? Well, the individual media are also disclosing some of those things. But just to give a little bit of information there, complementary. But thanks. I'm going to move on to another question. Now, for Thomas, no intention to imply that any of the several involved specialties is superior to any other one. But when it comes to publication, shouldn't journalists be given some priority, assuming it's their job and responsibility to put things in context and ensure that ethical principles are kept? I think we probably will benefit from a clarification there, but I suppose that is kind of a way in which he's trying to say that the priority comes to journalists above PR people or people who are constructing some of these platforms. That's how I read it. But I don't know how maybe you read it in a different way also, Tom.
Thanks for this. Yeah, I'm wondering. I think I would disagree, or my quick answer to the question would be no. We shouldn't only prioritize journalists, because journalists often respond to other narratives perpetuated by others in the broader ecosystem of narratives, so to speak. So often they respond to PR pieces produced by someone already. And while, I mean, I recognize that it is very hard to influence the way companies sell themselves to the public, there are ways of thinking of how we could do it. So each type of AI narrative will require a different type of solution. So when it comes to fictional narratives, so Hollywood-driven narratives, it might be that we want to uncover alternative narratives that are already out there, fictional narratives, and that's what the Global AI Narratives Project was about. So if you're interested in that, I mean, AInarratives.com is an entry point into these questions. So what other alternative narratives already are out there, and how we can highlight them as alternative to the one perpetuated by Hollywood and the Silicon Valley in conjunction. Then when it comes to journalistic narratives or media narratives, I mean, I guess the toolkit would be my personal answer. Like, I think we can help journalists do better and empower them to do better in these various ways. And then when it comes to PR specialists, it's about both at the same time. On the one hand, maybe educating them on how you can communicate the capabilities of the system that your company is producing in a way that doesn't diminish what the company is doing, but at the same time doing it in a way that doesn't perpetuate certain harmful stereotypes about the technology. And this might also require some regulation. So thinking about what it is legal to sell in a certain way. So we have some examples of certain products on the market that are there are some restrictions on how they can be marketed. So that would be the second type of or third type of response. And then finally thinking about academic or research-driven narratives, that kind of, I mean, the toolkit that we produce might not be really doing that directly, but it is also about making researchers both in industry and in academia aware of how some of the ways, some of the metaphors and some of the metaphors that they employ then influence how journalists report on artificial intelligence. So if a very famous professor keeps referring to, let's say, the idea of artificial general or AI consciousness, for example, which is a pretty complex internal debate within the field of AI. There is some disagreement, but this is just to say that if there are some very strong and powerful voices that do already refer within academia to certain narratives or metaphors, it is then very difficult for journalists to critique these metaphors or use alternative ones. So that's why to ensure that narratives of artificial intelligence or representations of AI are more responsible, we do have to think about this problem really comprehensively, looking at the whole ecosystem of narratives. That would be my answer.
Thank you, Tom. We have another question here that goes, thank you for your presentations, talking about harmful gender stereotypes and myths. When investigation gender-based and sexual violence, how can AI be used in ways that help alleviating harmful misrepresentations? For example, victim blaming rather than enhancing them.
I could take that.
Yeah.
It's actually what I've been writing down because I think that's a good question. I didn't want to miss the answers because this is very important reporting. So I think there are 4 things you can do. You can use AI to change the voices in edit without having to go to a studio where somebody will know you or know who you are working with. If you don't even want to go, you can actually make a Twitter space. This is something I've done as well. Make a Twitter space between you and the person, and you use the Twitter feature to change their voice and you record it. So before they start speaking, they actually have the chance to alter their voice, even if it's a live Twitter space, right? You can do that. And then you can also record it and then use it for your recording. You can alter their appearance as well in real time using AI VR filters as well. You can use AI to alter their location. You just have to let them know. The technicalities here are that you have to probably teach them how to use the AI, for example, how to alter their own voice or how to use the filter to change their surroundings. And then finally, you would have to check the AI bias if you are generating images. So AI will actually give you a stereotype depending on the prompt. If you're using some prompts, you want to check that. But you also want to be careful with AI because, as I mentioned, what you put into it, you need to be careful because you don't know where it goes or what the owner is using the information for. And that's why projects like what Thomas is doing is very important because that will now teach you clearly how to navigate all these types of things when you are reporting. So yeah, those would be my answers.
You want to jump on that one, Tom?
I can only add that an interesting use and potentially a very problematic one. So I wouldn't. This is not me recommending this as a solution to, or like as a direct answer to this question, but something I have seen and that is an interesting attempt at using AI to do precisely what the question is pointing to. So using AI to potentially alleviate harmful misrepresentations of victims of gender-based violence is the use of AI to so basically to drawing on testimonies of victims using generative AI to basically give them a voice and give them a face. so that people who respond to the story can essentially better empathize with the victim of a given story. There are also I mean, again, I would say they are problematic. This particular use of AI is potentially very problematic, but this is just pointing to what has been done precisely as a potential, I mean, as a potential solution to, or not a solution, but a potential answer to this question. And something similar has been done with children, because children obviously, I mean, cannot speak for themselves in this particular context. Journalists would not, in an ethical way, be able to incorporate their testimony directly. But then I have seen the use of AI, generative AI, to basically, again, give a particular story a voice and a face, so that, and you know, we can debate whether this is actually a good use. I would say not essentially, or not really, but there are this is one of them, and this, and in particular, this can be interesting in particular when it comes to, and even more problematic when it comes to victims who are no longer alive. But this is one very specific use that I have noticed, and that definitely requires more reflection. I don't think it should be, yeah, I think whether this is the right way to do it is questionable, but it has been done.
Thanks. There is one last question here about using AI to translate Pidgin to German. What software are you using to translate Pidgin? They're asking.
So actually, the language that I don't understand is German. So to my utter shame, I have the most common German surname, but I work in English, so I've never really been able to pick German. So, and yet I have to make money in Germany. So what I do is actually use AI. I've been using AI for a long time. And that has made me become multilingual. So I understand Pidgin. And because of that, I just listen to it and feed it into the AI. To be honest, Pidgin is also like English. So the AI picks it up, but not perfectly, because I've also tested that. So that's why it's a bit easy to do Pidgin to German. But when I bring in Yoruba, when I bring in Google Translate does a lot of that as well. And then I throw it into Morph. And then Morph will spit out audio from text. I can choose the person I want. I can choose the speed of the voice. I can choose the age, how the voice should sound. So it's a Black person. So I'm not using an AI presenter, but I can actually choose the type of voice to match the person who is speaking. And that's what I always do, to be able to cut across a German audience and an African audience. Thank you.
We don't have more questions from the public, but we have 4 minutes more. And I do have a question, and I would like to know your perspective about this. For many of the problems of AI in journalism, it is recommended to be transparent about the use of AI. So as long as you are transparent, that's how it goes, then you are being ethically responsible for whatever content you're producing. So I don't know what you think about transparency, the limitations of transparency in the use of AI in journalism.
Thomas, do you want to go, or should I?
I can try to answer quickly. And my answer would be that, and this is why I find some of these attempts to produce guidelines for journalists on using generative AI very problematic and tricky, because when it comes to transparency, I'm wondering, should journalists now be also required to reveal that they use Google rather than another search engine to do a research prior to writing specific articles, or should they be also revealing what tools they used to translate some sentences, you know, or indeed, like looking at, like, you know, when you look at Twitter and there is this automatic translation, like what kind of system is used to provide you with this automatic translation? And you're reporting on something happening in the EU and you refer to a tweet that is automatically translated for you by the system. So this is just to say, not that we shouldn't think of transparency when it comes to the usage of tools, But it is more to say, and I really think that Rona in her presentation, like really highlighted that brilliantly, is that journalists have been using, and not only journalists, researchers as well, have been using AI to do their work for a really long time. It's just that, and so we all are really giving into the hype where generative AI is presented as something completely new. And in many ways it is, don't get me wrong. It does come with new capabilities and new affordances. And yet we have been using AI for a long time to do our work as researchers, but also as communicators and journalists. And it wasn't really a question of whether we should reveal the use of our tools to do this job. So yeah, this is more of a reflection than an answer to your question. Sorry, but maybe Rona will have a better one.
It's very tricky because, as you say, where do we draw the line and then be equitable? Like, where do we tell people to be honest? You use Wikipedia, you use ChatGPT, but for me, I also understand it from another prism, which is that if we look at that example of the cultural magazine, nobody asked them, but they immediately said, we don't use AI-generated submissions. I think the issue of transparency now belongs to your audience. If transparency matters to your audience, you have to be transparent, or you're going to lose them. And I feel if journalists are listening carefully, they will know what is important to their audience. However, doesn't mean when you slap this was generated by AI everywhere, doesn't mean it matters when propaganda wants to use your reporting as a tool. It doesn't matter. Because most of the time, my own mother, who is a master's degree holder, will send me stuff on WhatsApp. Is this true? And I'm like, but mommy, did you look at the watermark? Like, it's right there, but she didn't see because the Twitter account shows parody accounts, but the screenshot she got from wherever, she has sent it out. So I think we have to balance it. And for me, audience is always king. If it matters to your audience, you better own up and say all the things you use to cook your stew, your content. But for me, transparency will always make people gravitate more in these early days of AI, because everyone's scared of AI. So they don't really want the newsrooms to say we are using AI. So you have to manage it.
Thank you very much, Rona. Thank you very much, Tom. That was a very stimulating public event, and I am sure that there's a lot of food for thought for our participants. I just want to thank you for your interventions, also to the participants who joined us, and also for their questions. It was great to have you, and hopefully see you again, maybe in another public event at for the data schools, or in CDH at the University of Cambridge. So thank you all, and see you soon.